Hello Year 9 and welcome to the first lesson of week 10. We have nearly completed our lessons on health and disease. Today we are going to be looking at something in particular, which is going to be smoking and the risk of disease. So that is what our lesson is going to be on. This does tie in with the non-communicable diseases and also what Miss Corbett did with you on risk factors for non-communicable diseases. So what do we need to take away from this lesson? So first of all, we need to be able to name the harmful substances found in tobacco smoke. And there are 3 that you need to know about. We need to be able to say how smoking increases the risk of developing lung diseases. For 5 to 6, we need to describe the effects of what is in tobacco smoke and look at the link between smoking and lung disease. Finally, for 7 to 8, we need to explain in detail the effects of harmful substances found in tobacco smoke, and that includes pregnancy, things like that, smoking while pregnant, and suggest possible causal mechanisms to explain trends in data. So when we get to the slide on data, where we're looking at some data, giving some ideas on what you think the cause will be for causal. Okay, so in 2016, the UK standardised cigarette packaging. So this was something that was introduced. They started putting in slogans, then they started putting in pictures as well, then they changed the colour, so it wasn't as visually appealing to people who were buying, particularly for youngsters. So it was in 2016 that we finally got to what is there now. How effective do you think this is at actually reducing the number of smokers? So packaging alone is all we're talking about. How effective do you think it is at reducing the number of people that smoke? Have a think about it. There's no right or wrong answer for this. This is just your own opinion. Okay, so there are about, in the world, 1.1 billion smokers, and smoking around 6,000 billion cigarettes each year. So that means that there is a big business in smoking, which caused obviously a lot of problems in the first place, because big cigarette brands would lobby governments and things like that. So the governments wouldn't introduce anything that's going to stop people buying them, and also that they didn't release the effects of smoking for a very long time. Now, every cigarette that's smoked contains tobacco leaves, so cigarettes contain tobacco. Tobacco is a plant. When they burn, they produce around 4,000 different chemicals that obviously go down your throat into your lungs, and 150 of those are linked to disease. So you can see on the picture we have got some different things that can be found inside cigarettes. It's not just tobacco leaves in there, there's also lots of other chemicals in the filters, in the papers, things like that. And the ones that are listed are some of the ones that cause disease. So as I say, there are many thousands, several thousand different chemicals found in cigarettes. You only need to know about 3 of them, which will come on to the next one. So you do not need to write down anything that is on this slide. Okay, this slide is just showing that from those thousands of chemicals that can be found in cigarette smoke, about, we said on the last one, what was it, 150 it can cause disease, but 70 of them are confirmed carcinogenic. And carcinogens are chemicals that increase your risk of getting cancer. Now, there's a few examples on the right-hand side, if anyone is interested in chemistry or wants to take it further. Some of the molecular formulas and things like that for them. but all of those cause cancer. Now, these are the three that we need to know. Okay, we need to know that in cigarettes you will find nicotine, and nicotine is the drug. This is the reason why people who smoke continue to smoke, because they're addicted to this drug, this nicotine. And nicotine produces a sensation of calm and well-being, and as I said, that's why people enjoy smoking. Now, that in itself, nicotine in itself, has got side effects, so bad parts to it, but compared to the other two, it's a lot less dangerous. So the next one is tar. So tar is a sticky brown substance, and when you smoke, it goes in with the smoke, and it's actually deposited in the lungs, and that makes smokers much more likely to get diseases such as bronchitis and also COPD. Tar is also one of the carcinogens. So tar is not a very nice chemical at all. Now, good link to chemistry. We also have some carbon monoxide in the smoke because of incomplete combustion. And carbon monoxide, as you know, it's bad for you. But what it does is it reduces the amount of oxygen that can get into the red blood cells. And it will actually do that by up to 10%. So it can cause shortages of oxygen getting around your body and breathlessness. So these are the three that we need to know. So if you could pause the video and put those three down, please. Okay, so here is some data in a table that has got on the left-hand side the number of cigarettes smoked per day. And on the right column, we've got the number of lung cancer cases per 100,000 men. So what I'd like you to do is you're going to pause the video, and I want you to think about what this table, I know it says graph there, sorry about that. What does this table actually show? What is the relationship between cigarettes smoked per day and the number of lung cancer cases? Now, can we be definitive in saying that one is causing the other? Is it a causal relationship, or is it just correlation? Is there just a relationship there? So what I would like you to do is pause the video and pop down your thoughts on what this data is showing, and whether you think that we could say that there is a causal relationship between these two pieces of information. Okay, so if you are asked to talk about data, most of the time, in fact, all of the time on what you're going to come across in your exams, the first column, so the left-hand side column, will be what is changing, your independent variable. So we can see that the first column, we have got the numbers getting bigger as they go down. On the right-hand side, this will be your dependent variable. This will be the information that you gather or measure depending on the first column. And again, we can see that the numbers are increasing. So we can say that as the number of cigarettes smoked per day increases, the number of lung cancer cases per 100,000 men also increases. So that would be how we would put our sentences if we were asked to do this in an exam. Now, I ask you to say whether you think that this is a causal relationship. Is it that cigarettes are causing the lung cancer? And the answer in this case is yes. So we as scientists know that there are many carcinogens in the cigarettes. So that is what is having an effect on the number of lung cancer cases. If it was different types of cancer, we might not be as sure. There might be other things involved in there. But for lung cancer cases, we know definitively that the cigarettes are causing those cases of lung cancer. Okay, we know that it's bad. People know that it's bad. People, it's up to them whether they smoke or not. But information is important. We should, before we make any decisions about things, have the information to hand. That is what science is all about. So you know some of the health effects of smoking. So we've spoken about lung cancer, but can you think of any other effects that smoking has on your health? So pause the video, see if you can make a list of different things that you know are caused by smoking, and we'll see if your answers match mine. So pause the video now, please. Okay, so just going to put in some of the answers. You're probably not going to have all of these. There is quite a range. This isn't a complete list either. So smoking can actually increase your risk of testicular cancer. It can cause heart disease, increase your risk of heart disease. It can impair your immune system, so that makes it harder to fight off diseases. We know that it causes lung cancer. That's quite a common one that is spoken about. It can cause asthma as well, so that's difficulty in breathing through the lining of the trachea, your windpipe. It causes dental hygiene problems, so discoloration of the teeth, breath, things like that. It can cause emphysema, which is a problem in the lungs. It can cause bronchitis, so that is an infection of the bronchi that we did several weeks ago when we were looking at the respiratory system. It can increase your risk of cervical cancer, kidney cancer, pancreatic cancer. It can cause sperm abnormalities, so sperm without tails or deformed tails, and even impotence, so that is inability to produce. It can cause leukemia, which is another form of cancer, stomach cancer, bladder cancer, and also menstrual problems. So there are quite a few adverse effects of smoking. Some you will be familiar with or heard of, but there are many others that you won't have heard. So what I would like you to do now is you're going to exit this video and you're going to go onto the link on Show My Homework for the effects of smoking. I want you to watch the video clip, and as the video clip is running, write down all of the harmful effects of smoking that are mentioned. You may be asked in an exam, what are the effects of smoking on health, things like that. So knowing a few of these will be really, really useful. So leave this PowerPoint now, go onto the link and pop down the effects of smoking. Okay, so hopefully we've watched the video now and put down some of the effects of smoking. There's quite a few, so I'm not going to list all of them, but as long as we have got some in the memory bank, then when we're asked about it in the questions in exams, then we'll be able to list. Now we're going to be looking at some specific examples. This one has been mentioned in previous lessons. We're going to be looking at the cilia, which are those specialized cells in the trachea. They have those hair-like projections, and they're the ones that waft up all of that mucus. So we're going to start off looking at damage to the lungs. So the cilia in the trachea are the ones that are important at moving that mucus, which contains bacteria and dirt, viruses, fungi as well, all of those pathogens, and they're moving it away from the lungs. Now, when people smoke, obviously the smoke goes down the trachea, and it actually anesthetizes those cilia, so it stops them from working. Now, because they're not working, it means they're not wafting up all of that mucus, and those pathogens can actually get into the lungs, and it increases your risk of lung infections. You also get this build-up of mucus in the trachea down into the lungs, which causes a lot of coughing as well. So here we've got a picture of some healthy cilia that are happily doing their job of wafting that mucus along. And on the right hand side, we have got the cilia that are not doing their job, causing a build-up of the mucus. So can you pause this video now? And can you, in your own words, you do not need to have all of that information, just a sentence will be sufficient, 2 sentences maximum. Can you put down damage to the lungs and one of the damages that it causes, which is to do with the cilia? Okay, so next up, we're going to be looking at bronchitis and COPD. Now, on the picture, we have got an image of some lungs that come from a healthy individual, so somebody who did not smoke. And also on the right hand side, we can see the lungs of a smoker. And there's a clear difference between the two, that you have got this dark black coloration on the smoker's lung. And that's actually caused by the tar that we spoke about earlier. Now, as you are smoking, that tar is going into your lungs and it actually builds up. So this is not from smoking one cigarette. This is from many years of smoking. Now, because we're having this build-up of tar and things like that, we've got other chemicals that are going in with the smoke, and that can cause an inflammation in the lungs, in the bronchi, okay, those structures that come off the trachea. And that inflammation of the bronchi is what is called bronchitis. And that's not particularly pleasant because it causes the inflammation, it causes breathlessness, discomfort, things like that. Now, another one that you might have heard of is COPD. Now, COPD, it stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So remembering from our heart, we know that the pulmonary artery, for instance, goes to the lungs because pulmonary is to do with the lungs. So the buildup of tar in the lungs can also lead to the causes the breakdown of the alveoli, those structures at the end, those really important air sacs at the end. And that breakdown of the alveoli is what COPD is. Now, because you are damaging the alveoli, it means that there's much less surface area in the lungs for that oxygen to get into the blood. And that causes breathlessness, and eventually it will actually lead to death because you're not getting enough oxygen into the blood for respiration around your body. So can we pause the video? Like with the last one, we're going to pop down these 2 this time, and just a sentence or 2 on each one on what the disease is and what it does. Okay, so hopefully we've popped a little bit down about bronchitis and COPD. You can use the abbreviation COPD in the exam. Now, the last kind of bit that we're going to look at that you might not think of immediately is the effects of smoking during pregnancy and the effects of smoking on the heart. So things that we haven't really covered so far. We're going to have 2 slides, but I would like you to also do a little bit of internet research along with what's going to come up on the slides, just to make notes of the effects of these 2 things. So we need to say what the effects are and what causes those effects. So the first one is smoking during pregnancy. And any smokers, if they become pregnant, one of the first things that will be spoken about is about giving up smoking. Now, we spoke a lot about how smoking reduces the amount of oxygen being taken up into the blood. So that's either from the carbon monoxide or through the diseases that we have mentioned. And that has a really bad effect on growing fetuses. So because the fetus is not getting enough oxygen, it can cause problems. Those problems are listed on the left-hand side. So you've got things like increasing the risk of complications, so things that might go wrong during the pregnancy or during the birth. Less likely to have a healthier pregnancy. Increases the risk of stillbirth. We've got baby is more likely to be born too early, so you're having premature births, more likely to be underweight because they're not able to develop the same, increased risk of cot death, or also known as sudden infant death, and children whose parents smoke are more likely to have asthma. So that's quite a list, quite a horrendous list of things that can go wrong for people who decide to smoke during pregnancy. Now we can see on the graph on the right hand side, going up the y-axis, we've got the percentage of stillbirths, and going along the x-axis, we've got different categories of non-smokers to smokers. So the green bar, the one with the least percentage of stillbirths, are for the non-smokers. Smokers who smoke 1 to 9 cigarettes a day are much more likely to have stillbirths, so it goes to 5.8. And again, those that are smoking more than 10 cigarettes, so this is the creamy coloured one, goes up to 8. And all smokers together average out as 7.1 percentage of having a stillbirth, which is nearly double that of non-smokers. So if you want to pause the video now and make some notes about the cause and the effects of smoking when pregnant, you can also add to that, especially if you are aiming for higher grades. You might want to have a look at some other data, perhaps on one of the other effects of pregnancy, and add that to your notes. Okay, so the next one we're going to be looking at is smoking and the heart. And it's not that it's directly affecting the heart tissue per se. What's actually going on is that it has a very detrimental effect on the arteries. So the chemicals in tobacco smoke affect your heart and also the blood vessels, as just mentioned. Scientists have data showing that smokers are more likely to suffer from cardiovascular problems than non-smokers. So smoking increases your risk of cardiovascular problems, which is one of the big killers in the West, much more than those that are non-smokers. They also worked out that the causal mechanisms that shows a causal link, not just correlation. So they actually know what it is about smoking that causes that increase in cardiovascular deaths. And you can see in the table that the more cigarettes that are smoked per day greatly increases the cardiovascular deaths per 100,000 men. Now, what's actually causing that is the smoke narrows the blood vessels. Okay, now that's because as you're smoking, it causes deposits, a fatty deposit, which is called a plaque, on the arteries, and that greatly reduces the amount of blood that can pass through. So we spoke about this when we look at the coronary arteries and problems associated with the coronary arteries. Cigarette smoke is one of those things that will cause that. Because we are blocking the arteries or reducing the blood that's going through, if it is a coronary artery, then obviously that is reducing the amount of oxygen and glucose getting to the heart muscles. It can also cause blood clots, which would lead to heart attack and strokes. So if you want to pause the video now and pop down your notes on smoking and the heart with some internet research, if you're aiming for the higher grades, to go with it. Okay, so hopefully we've got those now. So we have got quite a list of the effects of smoking. Some of the really important ones is obviously the one that is on the slide now, cardiovascular diseases, but also we need to know about the effects of smoking when pregnant and some of the other diseases involved, which we should have a list from the video. Okay, so we're going to finish off now with two questions. Just to demonstrate our understanding. So this is pulling together everything that you know outside the lesson, but also what we've covered in this lesson to do with smoking and its effects. So the first question, which is going to be worth 5 marks, so it should be taking you at least 5 minutes to answer. Many women continue to smoke when they are pregnant. Explain why smoking during pregnancy is harmful. So remember, our command word here is explain. So if we're explaining anything, we need to say why it is happening. So we need to think of the effects and why that is happening. So pause the video now and have a go at answering that 5-mark question. Okay, so hopefully you've had a stab at that question. I'm going to bring up an answer that I have. But you may have put some other valid points on there, but these are the ones, the obvious ones that came up with. So grab a different coloured pen, and if you could tick any of the marks that you gained in your answer, and then obviously you can correct it if necessary at the end. So one of the marks will be if you talk about carbon monoxide in the blood. Another mark would be that would reduce the amount of oxygen in the blood. If you said that would leave less oxygen for the developing fetus, then that would be a mark. And then if you gave some of the effects, so if you said that can cause premature birth, that would be a mark. If you said that it can have reduced weight of the babies or words to that effect, then that would be a mark. Or if you said stillbirth, that would be a mark. You might have mentioned some of the other ones that we had on the slide, which all would be relevant and marks involved for that. So count up the number of marks. Hopefully we are able to get close to 5, or if not 5, that would be a good mark to have. Okay, so the next question, and this is going to be worth 6 marks. So we need to be spending sort of between 6 and 10 minutes. Discuss the human and financial cost of smoking to individuals and to nations around the world. So this one is going to be talking about stuff that you know from outside the lessons. So do you know cigarettes to be cheap or expensive? What does that mean? What effect does smokers have on their nation? So if we have more smokers, for instance, in the UK, what does that mean for the nation? And therefore what it means, what it can mean to individuals around the world. So have a think about this. I've got obviously some answers that can get you marks, but you might put other valid points in there that won't be in the next slide, which would also be good. So can you pause the video now and have a go at that question? Okay, so quite an open question on discussing. Let's see if we got any of what I put down. So if you've said about smoking causing diseases, and perhaps you've mentioned some of those diseases, that would be a mark. If you have talked about premature births during pregnancy, if you smoke during pregnancy, that would be a mark, or low birth weight would be a mark, or stillbirths would be a mark. So things that we covered in the last question. If you said that it increases your risk of other diseases, so if you've named another disease, then that would get you a mark. You could have talked about how that would affect somebody's ability to work. That would be a mark. It would obviously affect their health. That would be a mark. And could cause death. or the death of a loved one. Either one of those would be a mark. So that's looking at the individual impact. If you said a loss of working, that there'll be loss of working time, so if people aren't working, it means that there will be that will have an effect on businesses. So if you spoke about that, that'd be a mark. If you said that it's costing hospitals, so in our case the NHS money, that would be a mark. If you put about, this one is a little bit outside the box, the cost of supporting people affected by the loss of family income. So if you spoke about claiming benefits on that because somebody's not able to work, so disability benefits, things like that, that would be a mark. If you said that nations or governments get money from tax on cigarettes because they are expensive, and that's because of the tax they pay, then that would be a mark. So hopefully we're able to get 6 of those points. As I said, there are many other answers that you could give. These are some of the more obvious ones. But if you think that you've got a valid point based on what we have spoken about and it's not a repetition, then that too would be worth a mark. So give yourself a mark out of 6, and hopefully we have got something that is close to 6. Okay, so that is it. So quite depressing lesson in terms of the effects of certain habits or lifestyles on people's health. So hopefully we're able to name the harmful substances found in tobacco. So we had the nicotine, the tar, and the carbon monoxide. Hopefully we're able to describe the effects of those harmful substances. So you can talk about diseases they cause, how they cause that, for 5 to 6. For 7 to 8, explain in detail the effects of the harmful substances. So going into detail about the effects of smoking on pregnancy, on the heart, things like that. Suggest possible causal mechanisms to explain trends. So that's talking about looking at the data and whether it is actually causing, one is causing the other, or whether it is just a relationship, which would be correlation. Okay, so very well done for continuing to access these lessons. We've got, as I say, another couple of lessons on health and disease, and then we'll be moving on to the next biology topics. Thank you very much. Take care of yourselves and your families. And talk to you soon. Goodbye.